weekend for the NCAA, so I've been running around like crazy. So like Joe said, I am the Director of Athletic Communications here at UW-Whitewater. Just some tidbits about myself, just to give you a brief introduction. I attended University of Wisconsin down in Madison for 4 years. I graduated with a degree in journalism. A lot of people in my profession are more kind of sports management. That tends to be the kind of the big hitter with guys who do what I do. But there are some journalism guys out there, guys that kind of discovered the newspaper business isn't doing too well. So I was one of those guys. I did work for the men's basketball team when I was there for 4 years. That kind of helped me get the, I guess, athletic department experience, kind of just realizing the environment of that sort of undertaking. I was a sports reporter for our campus newspaper up there. We actually had 2 that kind of competed back and forth. So I was with one of those, and that kind of helped me see sort of from a reporter's eyes what it's like to work with a college athletic department. So when I was done, I really didn't have much of an idea of what I wanted to do, so I was looking around, and I found this profession called sports information. And I thought, you know, maybe it's a writing thing, it's a sports thing. I can combine my 2 passions and do that. So I did. I applied to jobs all over. I ended up at Lakeland College, which is up in Sheboygan, here in Wisconsin, about a 2-hour drive from here. And I was a graduate assistant there, so I did get a master's. And as you can see, I've been hopped around a little bit since then. My first full-time job was at SUNY Potsdam. That's up in the upstate New York area. And is anybody in here on the track team? No? Okay. We actually had our outdoor national meet up in that area last year. So I then went to Capital University. It's in Columbus, Ohio. My wife is originally from Cleveland, Ohio, so we were there for 3 years. And then we decided to move back up here. I'm from Appleton originally, so when the UW-Whitewater job opened up, obviously has a very big national reputation for success, so it was definitely an attractive position for me. I figured my wife knew what the school was, so it was probably a pretty good place to go. So just a little bit about UW-Whitewater Athletics. We're in the Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. That should actually say 8 members. We lost UW Superior this past year, so 8 members in our conference. We are part of NCAA Division III, so we have 444 members, which is the largest level of Division III in the U.S. Division III is right around 300, 350 or so. We do sponsor 20 varsity sports. Sometimes people refer to it as 22, since we do have 2 seasons of track and field. We have an indoor season and then an outdoor season. So what does the sports information director do? I think the most simple way to look at it from my perspective is we're really in charge of 3 things. So the first one is statistics. I would say that's kind of the base of what we do. Probably 30 years ago, maybe even as recent as 20 years ago, stats were kind of the thing that a sports information director did. And now it's sort of expanded as we have, you know, new media popping up. So media relations is a big part of my job, especially on the football side. So I work with media, I pitch to them, they pitch to me like, hey, we want to cover this kid from our hometown, we'll come up and do that. So I work with media when they come on campus. One example, last year we were lucky enough to have some staff from ESPN on our campus to do a feature story on our head coach who has since departed for another institution. So they stopped by, and so that was me sort of showing them campus, telling them about different, you know, mini stories within the football program, things that they could use to produce the piece. So that was kind of my role there with them. That's one example. I work a lot more with our local newspaper, local radio, and those sort of more local media. Our coverage is a huge part of my job. That's probably 50% or more of what I do. So the main engine is our website. So uwwsports.com is our official athletics site. So We put all sorts of content up there through press releases, game notes, any previews, features on student athletes, former student athletes. And then we also put up obviously a bunch of photos and video. That tends to be sort of the direction that that websites are going to become more visual as opposed to more writing based. So some sort of side duties off of that. The sports information director or athletic communications director serves as an athletic administrator. So here at Whitewater, we do have sort of an administrative team that meets on a weekly basis that's headed by our athletic director. And then we also have several other positions, non-coaches, that report to that group as well. We have an assistant director of athletics for development, so that person works to try and fundraise for our department through major gifts. We also have a senior woman administrator. Carrie Corallo works with our compliance side of things, so they're working directly with the NCAA to make sure our student athletes are eligible. We also, part of that is our business manager. He handles our budgets. So it's about a 5, 6, 7 person team that we have, and the sports information director is part of that. So supervise and schedule work staff, so that I oversee a student staff of about 10 to 12 people, and they help me out at events, whether it's taking statistics, running stats to different areas of our football press box, taking video on a little handheld camera we have. So numerous things that our students do that we're lucky to have as staff that we do with students. We also put in nominations for awards and honors for our student athletes, so anything from weekly honors, conference players of the week, all the way up to National Player of the Year type awards. We usually have a hand in that. Also serves as a brand manager, so what I mean by that is everything that we put out externally that's in writing or in print usually comes through my office or is produced by my office. So we just make sure that we are brand compliant with our institution. At the Division III level, you don't have as large of an athletics presence. Now we're an exception a little bit in that we do have a large athletics presence, but at most institutions at the Division III level, the staffs just aren't large enough to, they need to collaborate with other people on campus, and so that's what we do in athletics and with our marketing and media relations department. So we also play a role in marketing and promotions, so I work closely with Leah Harms, our event manager and fan engagement person. So I work closely with her to promote different events that we have on campus. I think right now a central goal of ours is to get as many people as we can to our different events here in the Williams Center, out at Perkins Stadium, out at Fiscum Field, our soccer and track complex. So we have a hand in that as well, and then we also play a role in game management to some degree. This is mostly Leah's work, so our event managers work here, but oftentimes sports information personnel will be in charge of public address, music, staffing the scorers table or the press box, and then obviously managing the scoreboard at an event. So the SID plays a role in quite a bit, as you can see. So as I kind of mentioned briefly earlier, an SID typically has a degree in one of those fields. I've always been told, and this is kind of one of the central pieces of advice that people give aspiring young writers or public relations people, writing is extremely important. It's kind of the base of what you do in terms of communication. So once you have that kind of firmed up, and you become a solid writer, you read a lot of pieces to get better. That really makes a huge difference going forward in my profession. Also typically works as an undergraduate in the sports information office or athletics communication office. I did not actually do this. As I mentioned, I worked for the men's basketball team at Wisconsin, but I had no athletic communication experience coming out of college, and that hindered my ability to get jobs a little bit. So, so if you're looking at this profession, or if you're curious as to what it is, I would say the first thing to do is to reach out to, well, me, it would be here, but an SID or Director of Athletic Communications at any institution. And then a master's degree is typically kind of preferred. I always call it kind of a tiebreaker, meaning that if you're lined up against somebody with similar credentials and you have a master's degree and they don't, that just kind of tends to separate you a little bit. So, so that's kind of the way that I look at it. Not necessary, but certainly not frowned upon either. Important skills for SIDs and for athletic communications personnel. Certainly the communication side of things. I look at it as being sort of adaptable. I work with basically all 14 or 15 of our head coaches that we have here on a day-to-day basis. So working with them to communicate often requires just figuring out the way they prefer to communicate, whether it's picking up the phone and making a call, whether it's shooting them a text, sending an email. So I try and mold myself to whatever method that they prefer as a sports information director. Obviously writing I talked about. Knowledge of sports is also kind of a key component, especially when it comes to the statistics side of things. So just making sure that you're up to date on your NCAA rules and things like that certainly is helpful. And then ability to work in a fast-paced environment is extremely important. Sometimes coaches and people that you work with, other administrators, are not the most patient people in the world, so just making sure that you can make decisions quickly and work with them to get the information that they need to them is always of utmost importance. And to go along with that, multitasking as well, and trying to handle multiple things at once, which isn't really an issue for most of us. So a passion for working with college students as well. I think most of the time for me, I can sit through some meetings, I can pump out a couple of stories, but the best part of my day is talking with our student athletes, and that's what I truly enjoy. So, if I get to talk to them, even if it's just for a few minutes while they're waiting to speak with a member of the media, just, hey, how's your day going? How are classes? Things like that. That really makes it special for me. And a lot of the times, if I'm talking to them and they mention something, I may get an idea for a feature story, something I can pitch to our media. So, so that's where my passion lies. Technology-wise, there are a couple of skills. Stat Crew is the stat software we use for, I think, 4 or 5 of our sports here. Well, 9 if you include men's and women's. So 8 or 9 sports we work with Stat Crew, and so that's an extremely important skill and sort of the base for anybody who wants to work in sports information. And then some of the creative software there through Adobe. Video production and editing is sort of a bonus. If you can do that in athletics, you've got kind of a golden skill set there, and you can definitely find a job if you're into that kind of stuff. And then social media, just working at Whitewater, we work with Facebook, we work with Twitter, and we just started to dip our toe into Instagram as well. So, some department goals are, I guess this is sort of what I just kind of base everything I do around. So creating content, as I spoke about, sort of the coverage on our website is a big portion of that. But creating content for all audiences. So I'm looking at future students, I'm looking at current students, alumni, friends, family of UW-Whitewater student athletes and of our programs. And then faculty and staff, obviously, is a huge component of that as well. So creating content that everybody can consume and that everybody can enjoy. So promoting and recognizing our UW-Whitewater ambassadors, and those are our student athletes and coaches. They're the ones that put on the uniforms, they're the ones that go on the road and represent us, hopefully in a first-class manner. So that's the way that I try to promote and recognize them, is in a first-class manner. Pitching ideas, like I spoke about earlier, to local, regional, and national media. One example of that, just happened to see a Royal Purple story a few weeks ago on one of our cross-country student athletes, and happened to just mention it to her, just a quick 2-second email to her hometown newspaper, and a day later they called and did a story on her, and it appeared in that publication too. So just doing little things like that can make a world of difference, and obviously it promotes Whitewater in that area, and tells our story a little bit, which kind of goes to the last part. Really, that's kind of what it's all about, is to get our stories out there. Our student athletes are doing amazing things, not just on the field, but off the field as well. So that's ultimately my goal. Some trends in the profession. Like I said, it's becoming much more visual, kind of to that second bullet point there. It's becoming more visual in that people would rather look at a 6-second Vine clip than read a 500-word, game recap. So I'm trying to adapt to that. I'm a little bit old school in that I prefer I have more of a writing-based skill set based on my degree and some of the things that I've done. So I'm constantly adapting to that and trying to steer our content toward being more visual. The reality at top there is that the profession's never going away. It's a job that has, well, in my opinion, maybe I'm a little biased, but it's become sort of a necessity in college athletics, especially for an institution like UW-Whitewater that has kind of vaulted itself into the national spotlight because of all the success that we've had. As I talked about before, if you have a skill set in video production or editing, sports information offices and athletic communication offices all over are seeking these individuals. So if that's something that you worked with, or that your friends work with, if they work with UWW-TV and they want to work in athletics, I would encourage them to continue doing that, because that's just a skill, and for me, in my eyes, that's a skill that that people are looking for. Some hot button, I guess, kind of issues. Crisis communication is a big deal, especially as you kind of crawl to the Division I level. You'll all know, I'm sure, that those of you that follow sports, about Penn State and the issues that they had with their football coaching staff there. Trying to think more recently, the University of Missouri, and handling that issue with their football team, waiting out, I think it was on their president, holding out until he resigned, and that ended up happening. So there's some really powerful things that happen on campuses, especially as you get higher in that Division I level, where the bright light is sort of constantly on your department. One single tweet and could end your career at this point in time. So crisis communication is really something that's stressed to our profession a lot. And then student athletes and the social media, that's kind of what I was saying about the tweet that could end your career. Constantly kind of surveilling what they do, keeping an eye on what they do. I don't do so much of that here. We're not really A, staffed to do that, or B, it's not really, I don't think, an issue with a lot of our student athletes. But as you get higher in Division I, like I said, it's something that that our profession is sort of keeping an eye on with their student athletes. So why do we like what we do? Well, we like working with student athletes, like I said. Oftentimes the best part of my day is just interacting with them and working with them to tell their stories. You get to work with a lot of different personalities. So when I say that, I'm not putting all coaches in this category, but coaches tend to be very competitive, intense people, very passionate about what they do. And so I look at that, and that's something that, I aspire to be, as well, and be very passionate. You work with alumni offices, which is could be a different culture. We work with, like I said, our marketing and media relations, and they sort of bring a different perspective to athletics, so it's always good to work with them as well. I think the third bullet there, we get to be the insider. That's always something that I say when people ask me, why I do what I do, is to be an insider. You get to be, you know exactly what's going on at all times with UW Whitewater football or with UW Whitewater track and field. You get to be the guy who people go to for information. So that's always fun, and it's really easy to brag about our student athletes and our programs here. And then that kind of goes to that fourth bullet point, which is just being a part of something bigger. So here at UW Whitewater, winning national championships, having our student athletes get Scholar Athlete of the Year awards, being a part of that, and UW Whitewater and Warhawk Athletics is a privilege, and just to be a small part of that legacy is really big for us. There are some downsides to the job. Unfortunately, we work pretty long hours from September through May. That's kind of when our season starts really at the beginning of September with our fall sports, and then kind of wraps up at the end of May. I believe our last event last year was our outdoor track and field championships. I think it was Memorial Day weekend of May. So really between those 2 months, it's pretty busy for us. Just as an example, our first free weekend of this academic year where we don't have any events is December 25th and 26th, so Christmas and then the day after. And then the next day, we actually have an away men's basketball game. So really it's not even an entire weekend, but a good portion of one. And then really it's a lifestyle, it's not a job. This isn't a job where you can punch in from 9 to 5 and go home and kind of leave your work here. It's truly a profession where you're constantly working. You're checking emails on your phone. You're doing different things all the time. The nice thing is that I can do my job, most of my job, I would say probably 90% of it from home. So I carry a laptop with me at most times, and then obviously having my iPhone is extremely helpful as well. So it's a fast-moving job, and it's pretty constant, but the rewards are plentiful. Don't get me wrong. I guess sort of shifting gears a little bit, just talking about resume and cover letter stuff. So I've been a part of search committees for a few years now, and these are some of the things that I've noticed, especially with cover letters. Make sure you get to your point and get to it quickly. I've seen a lot of 2-page cover letters just get tossed in the trash because nobody really wants to read 2 pages worth of stuff. So just be concise, keep it tight, and just be concise. Be concise about why you want to be at the job you're applying to. Make sure you use active verbs when you're talking about your resume. So if you coordinated photography service, you supervised the NCAA volleyball championship event. Just use active verbs and make sure that they know you're doing something, not just NCAA volleyball championship. Make sure you don't address your cover letter to whom it may concern. I don't know, you might get some mixed reaction on this, but to me that's a little bit generic, and it's when I see that, it tells me that nobody's really done their homework, and they just kind of put that on top of all their cover letters. And I think it shows initiative and knowledge if you actually look up, who's the athletic director at the institution you're applying to, who's the top dog, who can I address directly. Change your cover letter to fit the job description. Don't just go through and change the name of the institution you're applying to. I've seen that a couple times where people have had different institutions throughout their cover letter, actually 2 or 3 different ones. So just make sure that you're not just putting company X and then changing it company Y to the next job you apply to. Especially in your resume, be quantitative where possible. I think it tends to be stronger evidence. So if you say, well, I raised our Twitter followers, okay, how many more Twitter followers do you have now? If it was 50% more, if if you reached a certain point, maybe 1,000 followers, something like that. So make it quantitative. I think it just looks a little bit better to the eye to see numbers, and I think it's, like I said, I think it's stronger evidence. Some interview tips, also just things that I've seen. Make sure you dress professionally. That sounds kind of obvious, but definitely err on the side of being too formal. Bring hard copies of everything that you put in your application. A lot of times people just don't have time to go through and print everything off, and it's much nicer to hold a paper copy, so make sure you do that. Do your homework on the company and the people you're interviewing with. So if they have a website, go and look at the directory. Maybe there's some bios up there for each staff member. Just go through and see who you're talking to, and see if you can get some little tidbits, maybe conversation pieces when you go to that interview. Listen first and then talk. I think this one's really important because a lot of times you can really get going in interviews. You can just sort of start spewing information and different things. People tend to tune you out. So make sure you just listen to what people are saying to you as opposed to just talking to talk or cutting them off. You've already impressed them enough to get an in-person interview, so I'm not saying be conservative, but definitely just try and keep it concise and make sure that they're not getting too off course. Send thank you notes to each person you interview with and try to personalize it. That sort of goes back to doing your homework. Say, hey, it was really nice talking to you about situation X that I faced in my previous job. Thanks for your consideration, that kind of thing. And then when you do follow up, don't leave the ball in their court. So if you say, if you contact somebody on Friday and say, hey, just something like just wondering the status of my job application, please let me know, what the next steps are or whatever. Make sure you don't do that. Say, I will follow up next week. Just don't leave the ball in their court. I think that makes it a little bit almost like you don't want the job, like you're just kind of doing your diligence. So that's all I have. It's about a half hour, so yeah, if anybody has any questions at this point, I kind of went fast through some information, but otherwise I'm happy to talk to anybody at any point if my contact information is out there. Yeah.
What are some skills you wish you would have had going into your first sports information job?
That's a good question. I would say for me personally, it was the statistics side of things. I had never worked with stat crew going into my first job, so having that base knowledge of working with that program would have been extremely helpful. And I think the other part of that is sort of opening myself up to be a little bit more creative, working with design programs, stuff like that. I was kind of behind the eight ball really with both of those things when I started, and had to play catch up a little bit.
One of my other peeps that we're supposed to have questions.
Yeah.
Like when you were at Madison, like how did you get experience like throughout your years to like any internships or anything like that?
It's a good question. I did work with the men's basketball team. I was a manager when I was there, so that was more for me. That was the experience of getting used to working in an athletic department. It was unpaid my first year, and then I did get paid a very little bit my last 3 years. So that was, I guess, one of the internships that I did, or different things. I was also a writer for the student newspaper, so I went out a little bit, covered some different teams. I was the football beat guy for my paper my senior year, so that was just kind of working my way up the ladder and gaining some different experiences in different sports.
What else? All right, thank you, Chris.
All right, thank you guys.